Welcome to the Thrive in China podcast from Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. The China Expert Series is here to educate and celebrate mistakes made by foreign investors whilst doing business in China. It includes personal stories from the China experts on the challenges they've experienced in the market, how they've overcome them, and what pieces of advice they can share with those of you who are just starting out. My name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia, and I'm a Hong Kong-born European with over 20 years experience in helping foreign investors enter the China and Hong Kong market. My mission is to help foreign investors, leaders, entrepreneurs avoid the most common obstacles that they encounter along their China business journey for them to accelerate their profitability. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Thrive in China podcast. Today, I've got Ryan on hand. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Let's kick off today's episode. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Where are you from? And what brought you to China back in the day?
Sounds great. And thanks for having me, Christina. I originally came to China in the late 90s. I think it was 97, 98, actually, as a youngster with family. And they, not too much later, actually left China and I went back to the UK, studied for a bit, and then was making decisions. I'm originally from the UK and was making decisions on what I wanted to do. And then one miserable evening in London when it was raining at 3 p.m. and getting dark, I kind of decided that I wanted to go back to China to kind of pursue my own business and see where things went and give it a go, I guess, right? And so I actually grew up in Suzhou, quite close to Shanghai, and I then set up a company at the time that was called Avant-Garde Consulting, which was like a marketing company. But back then WeChat had just kind of sprung up. It was around.
What year was this that you went back?
This would have been, I came back in 2009, 2010, I believe it was. Yeah. So
and
WeChat was kind of been
Suzhou
around.
Because you knew it?
I went back to Suzhou, so I knew it. Yeah. It was just kind of like an easy way, I guess, back into China. And then I quickly, at the time I was teaching to kind of try and subsidize what I was doing in my business work, and I managed to get a few contracts. So there was one with Parkway Health. Then there was one with some hotel chains that I've been working with at Crown Plaza, different things like that.
Let me just give some background, though, because I think a lot of people won't know what Parkway Health is. So I was living in Shanghai. So Parkway Health was the medical clinic, where you had pediatricians, GPs, really catering to the foreigners.
Yeah.
In the market, right?
Yeah.
At least that's what I don't want to misplace words, but for me, it was the place I would go because they had doctors from the US, from the UK that spoke English.
Yes.
And they had several clinics throughout Shanghai. Did they have it in Suzhou as well?
They didn't know. So it was actually in Shanghai through a friend that we started to do like some design work, brochures, online kind of audit. But yeah, at the time they didn't have one. I believe they have one in Suzhou now, but at the time it was all in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And yes, there was kind of like a few different clients had popped up. And then there was a contract. I was working with a friend of mine from Australia. His background was hospitality, and then we were drifting into different things, and we ended up then going into like this big lounge bar that was trying to open up across China called Revel. And we were essentially helping them with the hospitality side and how to grow. It was a big lounge. It was like, I think, 8,000 square meters. Something was massive. This lounge, right? It covered a whole top of a shopping mall. And so we started working with them, and then they opened up a number of other bars and restaurants, and it was quite good. But then I kind of realized I didn't want to be in hospitality. Very quickly, I realized I wanted to be in kind of retail, and that could never be done in Suzhou. So after 2 years, didn't even my business partner, he also was looking at going to Shanghai. We didn't even sell the business. We just kind of closed it and went, okay, that's the end of that chapter, and finished off the work we were doing, and then moved to Shanghai. So that was kind of, I guess, how I'd started. And I wouldn't say that business was a failure. It was a nice, comfortable company to have, right? Especially for starting off.
Right. It was a
starting point. Yeah. yeah. And
Did
very
you
lucky in a way
did
because we just was
you
able to.
I mean, you were an entrepreneur in 2009, 2000, a young entrepreneur in 2009, 2010. So, like, when you made that decision to close down, was it stressful or was it a relief? Or
It was a complete relief.
what were you
Yeah.
feeling at that moment in time?
It was I saw things getting too comfortable. So we were kind of like in terms of revenue bringing in enough for, I mean, I was 20 years old, 21 years
Mm,
old, right? Where we were kind of, bringing in enough money to live a very luxury life
right.
with three clients between the two of us.
Mm,
And but then we didn't really have the aspiration, or I wasn't we didn't have the aspiration, but in Suzhou we didn't see the ability for us to grow
mm,
more. And it was kind of just okay for us to have that, and that was all we needed.
right.
And so I was kind of worried after 6 or 7 months we got into that kind of period, and we started to specialize in almost nightlife, right? Like restaurants and
Right.
bars are always kind of very difficult hours.
Mm,
And I didn't like that at all.
mm,
Um, Sleeping all day and then kind of working on a
yeah.
night as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was kind of, I guess, it was with that friendship I had with my business partner when he was like, okay, I'm going to Shanghai. He'd kind of initiated it through a relationship he'd had and
Mhm.
decided he wanted to move. I was like, yeah, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to. That was kind of um, where we went, and we actually never really went into business again after that. He then went on to work for another company, and yeah, we went from there. So it was a really nice kind of like landing pad and a very protected, lovely way to enter into
Mm.
entrepreneurship, right?
You feel like you learned the with this entity, do you feel like you learned, I don't know, the bureaucracy of running a company, or do you feel that happened at the next stage? I mean, did you
That was the
learn?
next stage.
I mean,
Yeah,
did you learn, or did you make
I
mistakes that
learned.
you
Yeah,
improved on for the next phase?
yeah, definitely. Like a lot of the mistakes was we became very specialized, and I learned that that's something you just can't do in China. You can't if you become very specialized. It has its own risks, right? And
Mm,
everything changes so much. I mean, we went very much into kind of more like event planning, and if you do that, at some point COVID would have come along or something would have happened, and
yeah,
event planning isn't ideal in a situation like that. So it taught me not to do that, which in the future then I think with RedFern is a complete opposite, right? It's kind of become like moving into different sectors all the
yes,
time and looking at different opportunities. And I think that was the learning from then
right,
for sure. And also like to scale. Like I remember with RedFern, there was more a case of bringing on a team. And like we never had any investment, but bringing on a team and then kind of you have to bring in more clients. You have to scale to support that.
right,
Whereas in Suzhou, what I had as a youngster, it was just very comfortable, and the way it could be serviced and looked after, I didn't need to have a team.
right, right.
Um, it also taught me though the importance of having business partners. I think that was important. It never felt like a
How
lonely journey.
how do you define business partners?
I guess people who are kind of in it for the long run, right? I mean, some of them are shareholders, some of them you start the company with, some become shareholders, some, have just work with you for a very long time and they kind of become, I guess, part of the company furniture. And
Mm,
and I always see them as partners, right?
mhm,
Irrelevant of kind of like the equity in the business, kind of the people that are there in the long run, I always see as business partners and I've been kind of very fortunate in that sense.
mm.
And yeah, so I guess
So when
that's
you
yeah.
moved to Shanghai, is that when RedFern was born?
So yeah, so Redfern's a very funny story. I didn't actually come up with the name Redfern. And that's one thing that I get asked a lot, like, oh, it's quite a nice name. Where did that come from? There was actually a company called Redfern. So there was a company called Redfern Associates that was more like an accounting-based company in Shanghai. And at the time, the owner had said, so I joined, there was some kind of data opportunity to kind of build out like another JV and a potential opportunity with a company called Early Data, all about data mining. And I'd kind of joined as kind of an incubation for RedFern Digital. It
Mhm.
was kind of the goal of at the time the owner. It was a very different direction, and after a few months of kind of working there, I'd said, "Look, this is what I want to do. I want to build a digital marketing company. That's what I've done all the time. And the owner said, look, it's very different. We can separate it out later. You do that, right? And I was very fortunate that way, right? So it was like kind of who I knew and the connections was it did help. And so initially it was just myself in kind of a corner of this office. Um, and I love the name RedFern and the brand. So actually, little people don't know, but it's the from New Zealand, the phone, and then Red being China. That's actually
Oh,
the
interesting.
meaning behind it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not actually a district in an area of Sydney, which a lot of people think it's from. So it's yeah, so that's kind of how it started. And then in the beginning, um, there was at the time an intern who was part of Redfern Associates, who's now my business partner, Ashwin, who kind of said, "Oh, what are you doing? That's more interesting what I'm doing." And kind of he jumped on. I mean, that would have been now well, back in 2011, 2012, right? It was kind of just
Okay.
after I'd moved from Suzhou. Um, and so yeah, about 12 years ago. No, I think it's about 10, 11 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then so we started out in media. So it was like initially I kind of decided that we wanted to focus on FMCG, not limit ourselves though, like still have the ability to work with B2B clients, to work with, different types of
Mm,
assortment of brands, and that we were going to do media. But we always said in the beginning we wanted to become a sales company where we could essentially take on brands and distribute. We kind of always said that's where we need to go. But
hmm
to get there, we've got a number of things we have to go through. Um, and like the first year was tough. I think the first year we got like two, three, four clients at most. It was kind of just trying to understand what we were doing. We'd kind of invested heavily in data.
hmm
And basically, so data mining back then was really new, right? Just scraping data from all the platforms and then selling it on. We still do that today. But back then, I remember there was like a contract with Henkel that we were, signed or were looking to sign, and it was like 1.6 million for a year, right? It was a really kind of a profitable business venture, and we thought, wow, this is something that can work. But like anything in China, within 8 months, a bunch of people moved out of Alibaba, set up very similar companies, and that same data became worth about 16,000 RMB.
Right.
Um, and so that was kind of a very quick learning, and we kind of U-turned and went, oh, okay, let's just go back to what we know. We can keep the data and we can utilize it in different ways. And so, yeah, media was born at that point. We brought on another partner. So there was essentially myself, Ashwin, and then we brought on Emily Zhang. So Emily was essentially she'd worked in kind of big agencies for a number of years, and I, to be honest, still don't know what she saw in us. But said that obviously, these guys want to do something quite ambitious, so I'll give it a go. And she'd never really kind of she'd run businesses in restaurants and hospitality and things outside of her work, but not really in kind of the agency area she knew.
hmm
So she then joined, and then yeah, we had a lot of innovation in terms of our creative department and like production, video production, photo production. We built out all of our media team. We started using the data we were scraping to then pull KOLs and KOCs, and we kind of realized we could do more with it than just sell it. We could use it for ourselves, right? And then build that into like servicing and helping brands into the market. So that was kind of the main area. And then we built out like a data team around that to then also help with kind of market entry data packages. And then it kind of snowballed out of control. So from there, it was like kind of we've got this marketing data side. We then built on a creative team. We built a big video photo production studio. Um, and then we were like, okay, so we know this quite well. What's next? And that was obviously e-commerce, right? So that was kind of we can do the media, we can grow the brands. And we had like a company ethos at the time where it was like just never say no, right? Like we'll take a project on, we'll find the
Very
best
funny
people to
because
do
that
it.
was also our ethos back in the day. Never say no.
Yeah,
Just take
yeah,
everything on. No boundaries.
yeah. And I think that's a very China thing, right? Because I've always found there's a solution to something in China. You can find, even though it's seen as this really kind of
Yes.
like difficult market, there's also a lot
There's
of people that do a lot
always
of
to find a
things.
way around the rock, right? That you
Yes,
can,
yes,
it's either you go
yeah,
under it, over it, or on either side of it, or you bash right through it. There's always a way,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
and it's funny. And then so that was kind of like I guess our ethos at the time. So we ended up like designing whole brands and doing things that I think for like Emily, for example, she knew this, but like for me and Ashwin, this was just completely out of our realm.
Right.
And we like, yeah, we're creating like different movies and all sorts of stuff. And so it was we got lucky in a few things, like the KOL influencer market blew up and we had
Mm,
then access to, hundreds of thousands of KOLs we'd been kind of building in and things. We were very lucky in some ways as well, I think, right, in terms of how things grew and
mm.
changed, right? Um,
So
and
how many people are you today
today,
in China?
in China we're about 60 odd 70. Yeah, in the late 60s, mid 70s, I'd
So
say, somewhere between.
it's a nice smooth scaling up. I mean, it's not like, I mean, if we say you're 11 years in, right? It's a
Yeah,
nice scaling up. I mean, 60, 70
yeah,
people today, it's not rushed. It
yeah.
doesn't seem like it was rushed, but it was sort of like, taking, I mean, is it fair to say taking your time, but at the same time, not saying no to anything?
Yeah, definitely. I will say that the first 3 years was really we were thinking about what we wanted to do. So I mean, we didn't really start. I mean, media wasn't complete till 2015, right?
Mhm.
So we had a long time where we were building in the data, then that didn't work, and we were kind of, I guess, continuing to do in a way what I was doing in Suzhou, where we were just trying to understand what worked, what didn't,
Yeah.
and kind of build the learnings
And
for
I'm
later
winging it,
before we got
right?
too big.
Is it?
Yeah, and winging it. Yeah, completely winging it, and still on occasion winging it now. But yeah,
That's probably
definitely.
not what we should be telling people. but
No,
but but
no,
I mean I found with COVID, um, it was very clear for me to see two types of people that were going into China. Those that were willing to wing it and willing
yeah,
to make mistakes, and those that were in paralysis mode
yeah,
and in fear, right?
yeah, yeah,
Scared to pay a single penny, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and you kind of have to have a mix of both. You have to be intelligent enough not to take too many high risks, but at the same time, things are changing so fast in China, you have to wing it at certain points because there's no precedence for it. It's not like people are doing it in other countries. You kind of have to wing it and learn as you go because this is brand new territory for a lot of people. I mean, Ryan was telling me before we started recording about his experience in Vietnam and the expansion and how TikTok just arrived in September. So it's
Yeah,
winging TikTok in Vietnam now, right? Nobody knows how to
yeah,
do it.
exactly.
Nobody knows if they should download it, and you kind of are winging the
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, and I
So,
yeah,
so I've
definitely.
got a couple of questions about that 11 years now. Do you I'm trying to word it properly. Do you regret having gone down the data centric avenue initially? And following off on that is how important do you feel is data today for your clients?
No, not no. I wish we'd kind of put less eggs in the basket initially. But no, not at all. I think we still use data like a lot when it comes to like trying to advise brands, especially in e-commerce and like how we filter through it, what we understand, how we use it for like choosing brands. I mean, now we're in distribution, right? I mean, choosing the wrong brand to bring on for your portfolio is very costly, and so we
Now you
really
are
need that
saying no.
data. Sorry,
So now you are saying
yes.
no.
Yeah. In some ways, yes. I mean, there's it data's always helpful in that regard, right?
Right.
And
Well, it gives
so
you insight, right, in what decision
yeah,
you're going to make, right?
yeah,
So in
yeah.
your case, I mean, for Redfern itself, you're using data to also decide whether you take on a client or not.
For distribution, yes,
Yes.
yes. We'll kind of look at the risk around like pricing. Um, we'll look at sales and difficulty of category,
Mm,
point of difference, interest in social comment listening.
mm.
And like it doesn't mean that that brand couldn't go through our service model and do well. It just means that we know that there's time and effort that needs to be. There's a lot of time and effort. It's not going to be an easy win,
Mm.
And we kind of learned that the hard way when we first went into distribution, because I kind of went shopping and was like, oh, I will work with this brand and this brand and this brand.
Sure.
Got in a load of trouble with my business partners, and then you kind of run out of cash, right? And so now we try to use data much more to kind of say this is an easier win because there's nothing else quite like it that doesn't need the education. So I think, yeah, and taking our time initially, I mean, we didn't really push, I'd say, the business RedFern until say 2015. And then we kind of had like these really nice growth years up till 2019, where we were kind of adding 10 people, 15 people a year.
Mm.
And it was kind of just growing nicely. And then it was COVID. So since COVID, we've been pretty flat. Like we've been about the same since 2020, right?
Listen, that's
Um,
positive from my perspective. You know, people are
yeah, I mean, it
liquidating from the
could be
market, people are
worse.
exiting the
Yeah,
market. If you're able to at least stay flat and not downsize, that's already huge in terms of the
yeah,
stability that you've had, right?
yeah, yeah. I think it was just we like again, I don't know if it's luck or what it is, but like as we changed and we moved into e-commerce and e-commerce kind of boomed, and then as I said before, we put all the KOL, KOC data,
Mm.
that kind of boomed. And then when we as we went into 2020, we sat down as a team, the partners, and at this point there's four of us, and then we had like a strong management team,
Mm.
and we agreed that we were going to do more China for China. Right, this is before COVID hit. Like I
Mm.
just cannot believe that this discussion happened, and we'd said, look, we're here on the ground. We don't have offices around the world. We don't have the capabilities, a lot of agencies to go, to be in different areas and to talk to brands that are entering. Why can't we also focus on the big brands that are here, the Johnson and Johnsons, Nike and Adidas, and work with them? Because we did a lot of market entry back then. I think 70% of our business was market entry, so 80% of our business here. And so we then in a year went through this huge transition of focus, and we changed our business to being about 70% China for China,
Mm.
like very quickly. And that was like hiring a Chinese sales team, and then a lot of the Chinese business partners taking on more of a role on the sales side. And that like if we hadn't have done that, I don't know where things would have been, because really market entry then in 2021, 2022 into China did drop. It's coming back now, and it's definitely strengthening. But there was definitely a quiet year and a half there, right? So yeah, so it was just another kind of lucky thing, I guess.
It's I think it's always a difficult decision to, like, is it fair to say localize the business where you're doing China for China, right? As a foreign partner, Ash is also a foreign partner. Elaine, I'm guessing, is mainland Chinese, and then you said you have a
Emily
foreign
is
partner.
Chinese, yes.
Emily, sorry.
Yeah.
So how is it for you to relinquish some of that control? Because I'm guessing you were really focused on the client acquisition aspect and potentially client management as well. How do you then relinquish the control and say, okay, guys, I can't win Chinese clients for you. We're
Yeah.
going to have a Chinese sales team that wins those clients and does the acquisition. Kind of, you're delegating now, right? It's more of that
Yeah.
step. So how did you take that process? Was it an easy thing to do? Is it sometimes difficult to relinquish that control? Because there are a lot of companies that are localizing now, right? And you've got to,
Yeah.
China is now a place where you don't necessarily need a foreigner sitting on the ground. And COVID is
Yeah.
showing a lot of foreigners left. So people are localizing.
Yes.
So how do
Yes.
you relinquish that? Let's use a better term. How do you delegate to that team?
Yeah. It very hard. It's very, very hard. And definitely some mistakes, I'd say, in the beginning. So now we've got like a management team. Um, one thing that I've always said to people is like a lot of people find like entrepreneurship quite lonely. And there's lots of organizations you can join where you kind of don't feel alone and they'll kind of help you. I've never really had that because I've always kind of built a strong management team around myself, right? And so they'll kind of tell me if, I mean, they don't tell on each other, but they'll say, oh, if this one particular person's done something wrong, they'll come and tell me about it, or they'll kind of work with each other and give each other a hug when they're down. But it kind of creates this like a circle of trust. And so in the beginning, what I kind of did was like, okay, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this. And it just went, we had some immediate problems very quickly, and I came back in. And then I realized it's kind of like a rope exercise where you're just giving a little bit more rope, and it's not going to happen over a month. It's going to happen over 18 months.
Mm.
And I've just slowly realized I'll go away on a holiday now, come back, and everything's still great. And that's something 18 months ago wouldn't have
What
happened.
happened?
And I found that actually it's some things in the business have become better because of the lack of micromanagement. I can now focus on other things that are more strategic for our clients. I can focus on other things like, global expansion
Mm.
that I couldn't have because I didn't have the time.
Mm.
And so it's definitely been kind of a period of kind of just giving that bit more rope and kind of being there for the team and being supportive. And instead also I found, especially in Chinese culture, instead of telling people they're doing things wrong, trying to suggest to them, can get people down, right? And they lose confidence,
Sure.
but trying to build up that confidence, I think, has been really important. And with this Chinese sales team, it's just been like huge trial and error. So sales is one of them things where it's really hard to see whether someone's good at sales and, building a
Can't
pipeline.
see it in the
It's
interview phase. I mean, it's impossible to see it in the interview phase. You have
it's
to.
impossible.
It's winging it. You like the guy, you hire the guy, and then you have that's why you have a probation period. You're going to see how motivated they are in that
Exactly.
probation period, right?
Exactly.
Did you
Yeah.
have a lot of turnover in the Chinese sales team?
No, I mean, to be honest, we don't have a big sales team. Our entire sales team would be 5 people, and two
Oh
of them
wow.
are Chinese. It's we don't have a big sales team. We what I've tried to do is kind of push the management team to also, the Chinese management team, which we've got 3 people on the Chinese management team, kind of on director level, and then we've got 2 sales. You've got 5 people that are actively looking for business on the
Mm.
Chinese side, right? We've redone all of our marketing and different things so that when a Chinese company looks at us, we're a Chinese business in a way.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And they run the pitches, and as a foreigner, I don't even go to them pitches because it's almost damaging at times.
Mm.
Because we want to be seen as a Chinese media company.
Right.
And so it was, yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. I think at one point we probably had 5 or 6 Chinese sales team, like we kind of built it out. And so, no, now we have 3. Sorry, we have 3. So it's just been kind of a bit of trial and error, and then realizing what worked, what didn't work, and then also trying to build in hierarchy into the sales
Right.
team as well.
And this you've
Um,
developed over 18 months. That's really fast.
Yeah, from start to finish, like literally it would have been towards the end of about a year. So like probably January 2022. We
Wow.
we kind of said that's where we need to start building it.
Right.
And that because we'd said that okay, we're doing China for China in 2020 and that we would start to transition, but it took us a year then to really even longer, right? It took us a year and a half to then put that into action where
Well, I
we
think
changed all of what we were
let's
doing
that whole year and a half was also survival, wasn't it?
as well.
I mean,
Yes,
you
yes,
surviving and then your clients surviving.
yeah,
So
yeah,
super interesting.
definitely.
And now, I mean, now your focus is on you use the term global expansion. So I don't want to say you're done for China. China is the biggest part of your business, but where are you looking at expanding into? What was the decision behind doing all of that? And then
Yeah, so
I have another question, just literally out of my own curiosity is why have you decided to expand globally and not increase your service line items? Because I mean, you went from data to media to e-commerce.
yeah, the distribution. Yeah.
Why not add on to that versus uh, expanding into other territories?
Um, it's a good point. I guess we've so to answer the second part first, we've kind of got to a point where the model works quite well for
Hmm.
FMCG. Um, and so if we want to bring on a brand and what we want to do is to create, I guess, and like we're still evolving our services, but within them areas, right? So our video photo production now, we're building a facility in Hangzhou to do over 1,000 videos a week, right? Where it's just going to be small, tiny kind of
Yeah.
what I see to be completely useless videos, but that Gen Z think are fantastic, right? Love watching. but it's kind of like, yeah, we were still evolving them elements, but we've built enough where we can take on a brand as a brand management agency, which we've started to try and define ourselves as, and um we can work with them through our services and support all that they need, and it works well, right? And we focused on trying to get better at what we do. So like we've built our own affiliate program with guaranteed sales and different things like live streaming capability within them realms. For us to add more, I just feel it would dilute our capabilities within them areas, if that makes sense. Because before, when we were just media, we couldn't bring on a brand and say, okay, we'll sell you in China, right? We couldn't do that with e-commerce. With other areas we can, and in other regions we've changed, right? So yeah, I guess global expansion is still Asia expansion.
Yes.
Really. So it's not quite global, but it's where, yeah, we've expanded into different regions. We've got like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia. Vietnam's kind of like our central area. And even with them areas also, we have changed our model again, and we have added more services. So we do like offline retail, which is completely different for a company called RedFern Digital. So it's a whole different area of working with supermarkets and inventory management, warehousing, and a lot of areas that are quite different. So we're still evolving, I guess, but it's like the markets are different. And the reason why was just simply the kind of, when we looked at brands that were coming into Asia, it was giving them variety of where they can go, right? So you've got smaller markets, then we'll tick the box. The fact is China is a big market and it's going to be tough. And so for a medium, even a small to medium potentially, but a medium to large company, China is going to be the choice. And we still say that. If you're going to come to Asia and you want to build a big business, you're not going to go to Singapore because it's too small, right? Or you're not going to go to Indonesia because the market's just not developed enough.
Yes.
So we wanted to have something where there's variety, where we can have a smaller business, I don't know, from the UK that specializes in particular type of soft drink. We know that soft drinks do well in Vietnam, that, they've got 5 staff, and they want to kind of globally enter somewhere they're not sure. Vietnam would be a good option for them, and it's a low cost entry, and they can give that a go, right? And so that was kind of like the option for us, where we can talk to brands and say, if you're coming to Asia, we can support you on that journey. And I guess that's where it was. And it's not that, like, we're trying to put less emphasis on China. Our China business is still growing faster than ever. It's just that it was that kind of alternative, right? That's there.
I mean,
Yeah.
you opened the can of worms about the cost structuring, and this is always an issue that I see, especially with brands that are evaluating market entry, whether it's China. Obviously, my markets are China and Hong Kong, so they're predominantly asking about China, or Vietnam. And again, I'm not a marketeer, don't aim to be, but the question that always does arise is, how much should we be budgeting for marketing? How much should we be budgeting for advertising and getting our brand out there? And I truly believe that there is a sense that it's not as much as it should be. People are under evaluating the importance of going big, and this is my perspective. What's your perspective on that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the thing is, if you look at investment in China, around 50% of the investment that you'll make in the market's probably around marketing, right? At least 50% your first year. That's what they kind of say it'll be. So
if you say that your registered capital is $500,000 US dollars, then actually 250,000 of that spend will be on marketing and branding.
Yeah. I mean, for FMCG, right? I mean, different categories are very different. But in FMCG, yeah, I'd say at least that. And so if you get the marketing wrong, you get China wrong sometimes, right? I mean, a lot of in FMCG, the big failures of China was, yes, some didn't localize right? Some of them had legal issues they didn't deal with. There's always these problems. The next biggest one, or the biggest one, would be marketing, right? Just misuse of funds on marketing and not spending in the right way, and not looking at how to grow a brand and not growing that brand effectively. And I think that's for China, definitely a big part. For Southeast Asia, though, even there, it's the number one thing we bring on brands is like, how big's a marketing budget? That's kind of like the retail team. Like, how can we support on marketing? Um, so I think it's something that brands need to consider just because of the amount of competition out there. Um, Within categories now, you have to have a decent budget to kind of just get eyeballs on the product and for people to see it and for them to then give it a chance.
Mm.
Um,
Do
yeah.
you feel that the way you pitch to foreign clients nowadays has changed from 10 years ago to today?
Yeah, I think
Are they evaluating things differently?
yeah, they are. I think nowadays there was a time, I think actually recently, so like the last 3 years, 2 years with COVID, it's changed. So up until COVID, we'd have a lot of brands that were kind of, private equity backed, or, there's some kind of funding where they just wanted to grow, right? They wanted to come to China and they wanted to do $30 million first year, and I don't mind what that'll cost me, but I want to get to that point and I'll push it and grow it to that level. Um, which is always nice because in China, once you build out a certain size of a market, you get word of mouth and you get that organic growth, and it's nice to do business that way. The issue now is you've got a lot of brands that I think globally are looking at profitability. And so they're kind of saying, like, look, I'll spend $1 million in China, but I need to get $4 million back, right? And how can I make sure that this is a success? And I've got to show on a global scale that profitability. So what I've found is that can be done. It's a market where that can be done, but we're definitely looking at things differently, right? Be more specific about how we spend, and looking at more affiliate based programs rather than large scale celebrity programs. And I think also now, like, one of the big things in the company is the word slow burn, right? So we've got brands that are coming, and instead of like coming in and dashing and spending an absolute fortune, they're saying, I want to set this up. I want to have a Tmall store. I want to have an offline distributor. They're just going to sell into 3 retail stores. I'm then going to go set up my entity, and I'm then going to do that. And they'll have like a 5-year plan,
Okay.
right? And they're kind of saying, this is what I'm going to do over the next 5 years. And I might not make millions of dollars from it, but this is how I want to attack China.
Mm.
And we call it kind of like the slow burn approach. And there's nothing wrong with that approach in many ways. It just means that you're going to be kind of, I guess, spending the same amount over a longer period of time, and hoping things take off at a given
And maybe
time,
not
right?
getting the return as you would otherwise, because it'd be slower.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is with China, if you kind of dash in and make a big amount of noise, you can do really well. Like all of the successful brands in China, that's what they did.
Mm.
But the slow burn approach does, I mean, we work with clients where they've managed to, over 10 years, become household names, right? I mean, one of the brands we work with, Bundaberg Drinks, they've done very well in market, incredible with their distributor, and it's been over a long period of time. But it doesn't work for everyone, right? There's also a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make that happen. Um, but yeah, I guess they're the kind of the discussions. It's always like, what do you want to achieve? Whereas it was always before, I want to grow a $10 million business in China as quickly as possible. Now it's different. Like the reasons for coming to China have changed.
Mm.
That's kind of, yeah.
So generally speaking, over the last 10 years, and the reason why I'm asking this question is because this is what people come to the podcast to listen to, is what have been some of your war stories? I mean, you've been in China since
Mhm.
2009. I mean, you have the whole period where you grew up in Suzhou as well, but what have been some of your war stories? What are things that happened where you've learned from now, and you'd never do it again, basically? Um,
Yeah. That's a good one. Recruitment's always hard in China. So we once had a mutiny back in, I think it was 2017, where a
what a
bunch of people got to,
word! What a word that you use. Now we have to delve
yeah.
in. You had a mutiny. I don't know. Were police called or what happened?
It was, yeah, no, it was that kind, like, it felt like a mutiny to me anyway, right? So it was like where we had like 6 to 7 team members kind of all came together and they just resigned on one night, right? over the fact that they'd kind of grown, I guess, toxic together, right? About what they felt they should be doing in the company, da 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 da. And one of them had had a fallout with someone else, and it just kind of I didn't pay attention to it, and I just thought, look, they're just being upset about things, but we all get along. And anyways, it was a bit of a mutiny. And it was kind of like, okay, now we've got a month. What about our clients and how's this going to work? And it's just something you don't really, I think, in a lot of other countries have to deal with, right? And then successively, the mutiny
Were
grew.
they asking,
So
were they expecting you to be okay with the resignation, or were they expecting a negotiation from you that you would then
there
say,
was no, yeah, there was no negotiation.
okay,
There was just kind of like, we have decided, I think, that we're leaving, and that's what we. I mean, it happens all the time in China. I find that
yeah,
the
but six or
the
seven
the
on one night is pretty tough.
is pretty tough. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. And it was kind of clearly planned, and it upset. That's where the management team are, right? I found at the time I was devastated by it. I was just like, it's so unnecessary. And we were okay. We managed to like convince two or three of the nicer ones to extend a couple more months, and we
Mm,
hired. Actually, the first thing I did was then actually hire a HR manager, which we never had,
mm.
and so that I wouldn't have to deal with that. Right?
It's
Again, if we ever have
amazing.
this
I mean, that's
problem,
an instigator, having an HR manager and having the ability to have that resource is huge, right? You
yeah,
know,
it's amazing because it just takes that all away. And I've always found recruitment, hiring, HR not really my strength.
right.
For me, it's always been about growing a business and the operations side and strategy that I've enjoyed. So that was kind of one thing that was definitely a bit of a horror story. And I think anyone in China, because at some point in recruitment and HR have had issues, right? It's one of them things. And yeah, in other markets, it's almost like trying to get rid of people. It's the opposite. It's the opposite problem, right? Whereas just yeah, the turnover in staff, and it's got better, I think, because of the economy and COVID. Right now, actually, it's not too much of an issue as it was before, but in that period, it was. So that was definitely a bit of a nightmare. We've had you know vendors run off with money in the past. I think that's happens as well. So and
And
then you go to
what have you put in place to protect yourself from that? Is there anything you can do to protect yourself from that?
There's really not. I mean, if I look back now over the years, we probably had around 600,000 to 700,000 RMB in vendor money that's kind of they've ran off with, yeah, and different things where we've had a very locked in contract. We've even been to court and won, um, but you don't get that money. Like let's just say we're still waiting on it to come back. And we yeah, so I mean that's one thing, but I think it happens in all cases, right? So I think that we're just very careful of the vendors we choose, because it's not like, for example, I can go back to the client and say, oh, they ran off with the money,
You have to pay.
sorry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
You're taking
yeah,
on
so
that liability, right? You're managing their
we
money.
take on the liability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've never even mentioned to the client, we've just then gone and paid again to another vendor. And it's always very similar, like live streaming vendors, you have to work with particular types of vendors that can have this know-how, right? And live streamers, they boom and bust within months. And so we'd work with a live streamer, we'd have done a few great streams, given them another bit of money for another stream, and then they've just kind of disappeared.
Wow.
um, so yeah, so that's happened a few times. That would be another horror
I'm
story, but
curious, do you feel with these KOLs and these vendors, do you sign contracts? I mean, are there contracts in place? And are
yeah.
those contracts, I mean, it's a silly question because it doesn't sound like it's helping you, but are those contracts protective in some form? I'm asking this because a lot
Yes,
of people around always say, well, in China, everybody's a crook, and what's the point of having contracts? Nobody abides
yeah,
by them, right? So I'm just
yeah.
curious, would you still maintain contracts? I mean, you've even gone to the extent of going to court with one of the vendors, but what would be, you know, are you
Yeah,
updating?
so we've been in court with 3 to 4 vendors, um, and we won every case.
And is it
So
based on the off of the contract terms?
yes, so the contracts are very important in China, without a doubt. The problem that we've had with these vendors, and to be honest, we've always been paid by our Chinese vendors. The ones that haven't paid us have usually been small companies that went bust and did not have the ability to pay.
I see.
And so it's a bit different in that, to be fair, even in the West, how would they pay? And actually, the enforcement of the law here is crazy. Like the government then will blacklist them. They can't stay in hotels. They can't take trains. There's a lot
Oh,
of
wow.
different things. If you owe money and you go into bankruptcy, you go into a blacklist. You can't go abroad. There's an array of things that they put in place to stop people trying to do this.
Mm,
And if we didn't have the contract in place, we could never have gone to court. The issue is then getting the money back is a whole different discussion.
right.
But contracts definitely work, right? It's not, I would say, an issue, and I think it's a very media specific issue. This happens a lot in the media industry, and I hear a lot about it there,
Mm,
because you are dealing with KOLs and KOCs that have a six
right.
month life cycle,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, no, the contract, if we didn't have the contract, we couldn't have even gone to court. And
Sure.
I'm sure some of them will pay back. I doubt they want to be blacklisted forever. It's just, it'll take time, right? Um, which is okay, which is fine. But I
I
guess
did
that
not know
was,
that was a big thing in
yeah.
the media realm. Um,
Yeah. So you deal with, so we'll get budgets from clients, and then our job is to go out and find individual KOLs, KOCs, live streamers, and we'll, off one budget, maybe sometimes contract up to 900 individual
AOLs.
like influencers,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so there's always going to be one or two where they just kind of they don't post or something happens. A lot of chasing up, a lot of following up. We contract every single one. I know of agencies that don't because it's just too much work. They'd just rather the three that it cost 4,000 RMB each, they just
Right.
lose it, right? And they just
Right.
go through that. It's not worth it. So we're usually pretty good. It's just been ones where they've kind of gone under and they've had their own live streaming business, and
Right.
that's been an issue. But yeah, media, it's definitely a problem.
Super interesting. Any other war stories you want to highlight?
Um, I mean, COVID was a bit of a war story. I think
It
yeah,
was. It
definitely
was for everybody. Yeah.
the Shanghai lockdown, having like some of our staff go to the central camps, and not having enough food at home and trying to order different like kind of batch deliveries while working was tough. That was kind of an unpredictable period.
Completely unpredictable.
And Yeah, that was quite hard. That was a difficult period, I'd say. But I think that was for a lot of people, right?
Do you
So
feel that it brought the team together?
it did. I mean, the interesting part is within that year, I don't think we ever had any resignations. So the other war story actually disappeared.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone was kind of like banding together, and I guess people were appreciative they had employment as well during that time, right? And that we continued to have clients and business was kind of still running, but we couldn't leave our apartment. It was
Right.
quite a bizarre concept. And I felt, yeah, people definitely within the community started to kind of
Mm.
come together.
So just
Yeah,
looking at the future now, because I mean that wasn't long ago. I mean that ended what in
yeah,
June 22, right?
yeah,
July-ish to 22. But obviously we always say Shanghai lockdowns, and I always keep wanting to remind people it wasn't just Shanghai that had lockdowns. They call it the Shanghai lockdowns, but there were plenty of other cities.
they were.
Actually, the lockdowns went beyond Shanghai, or were in and
Yes.
out of the time frame. But
Yeah,
borders have opened now since January.
yeah.
How do you see the Chinese market in the last 9 months?
But the first 3 months were tough because it was kind of like recuperation. Q2 was a disappointment, I think. You'll see a lot in the media, like, whoa, what happened? Where's this big rebound? Because I think a lot of Chinese people have been very cautious.
Were you expecting that? You personally, were you expecting a big rebound?
I personally was, yeah. I thought because like the amount of money I saved myself just being stuck in an apartment in 2022, like there was nothing to do. So it
Right.
was kind of like I just felt that everyone, but what I think is almost on the back, people became conditioned not to spend,
Mm,
right? They kind of realized, and there was this conditioning process, and it takes time to break out of that. Like, why do I need to do this? And the other thing was that when we look at retail, I don't think the forecast put in place took into account experiential living, right? Where it's kind of like people want to go to restaurants, like people want to have experiences, people want to go on holiday, like domestic tourism is huge right now. It's skyrocketed. International tourism is coming back in a very big way, very quickly. And so retail got left behind. People will still buy, it will come back. But I think Q2 was that kind of, I want to do things, not necessarily have things.
Mm.
And that was kind of economically misforecast. Um, we are seeing now Q3 things getting better, right? So it is coming back, retail and spending. It's a little bit flat, but it's still China. I mean, it's still going to have growth this year.
What's your
Um,
expectation for 11/11?
it'll definitely be better than 618. So it'll I don't know how much better, but it has to be better. I think, yeah, I think the economy isn't great, but people still have a lot of cash that they've saved over time, and I think Double 11 will be much better. But
My
yeah,
my perspective for 2023, I just had to check what year we were in. 2023, I was just expecting stability. I felt with
yeah,
borders being opened, it was the chance for people to get back on the ground and just stabilize their businesses and see if their employees were okay, uh, maintain status quo with gradual, very gradual growth. And when I say
yeah,
growth, I mean we're talking about growth from end of 2022, which was bottom, right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like you can't compare it to previous years. Um, I have to say my push is I'm really looking at 2024 with excitement.
yeah,
Uh, with all the negativity I've experienced about China in the last 3 years, I'm hoping that now people have kind of tested the waters. They've flown to China, no more masks, no more COVID tests. It's really back to how it was. And also for the people locally there, they've had this 1 year of experiencing also domestic travel. Some have even been lucky enough to do international travel, and just this movement around that. I'm hoping, I really hope and anticipate 2024 to be a bigger boost. Um,
yeah, yeah.
and do you feel that as well a little bit?
I completely agree. I completely agree. I mean, it's just talking to brands now of who's coming up for a CIE, right? I mean, and who's going to be in town that week. It's like everyone's going. And so I think whenever you want to, and this was the same when we were expanding across Asia, like we never really opened an office without having some understanding or knowledge of being there or being able to go there. That was kind of part of it, right? A little bit of it was part of it. Um, and so I think the with everyone coming now, they'll see, look, China's not kind of the horror story that sometimes it gets in Western
Talking
media.
about
It's still
CIIE,
very much functioning.
do you feel brands are coming over to sign deals, or do you feel they're coming over to be seen? Because there's a huge difference between the two things.
I think they're definitely coming looking for a business to in China. I think they're coming to sign deals.
Do you think it's going to
Um,
happen realistically, though? I still
I
think that's
think
just too early.
I think it's I think some will be signed. I think the size and the size of the deals that will be signed maybe won't be as big as people anticipate.
Hmm,
I think that, but I
fair
still
enough.
think there's still, distributors are still looking for brands. We're still talking to brands. We're still looking for brands. I mean, and we know distributors, like whenever I've talked to a brand, they've said, "Oh, I've been talking to this distributor, this distributor." So it's definitely coming back, for sure, right? Um, and a lot of the e-commerce businesses are still doing well. I
Hmm.
mean, it's still a big market. There's still a lot of opportunity. It's definitely competitive. But yeah, no, I mean, the market itself is still there, right? It's not strong. People are still buying things. It's not got smaller. It's still the biggest retail market in the world, right? And the biggest e-commerce market in the world. I think there will be deals to be done. And then also you've got to think there's when I look at, for example, City Super in China versus in some other countries in Southeast Asia, there's actually a lack of foreign products, in my opinion. There's not as many as there used to be because no one's been coming in and replenishing all of their products, right? And so I think there's a gap needed for foreign products in China right now.
Hmm.
A lot of people say that, oh, okay, national kind of nationalism and domestic products have taken that space, but all the Chinese people I know love still to buy foreign products, food and
Yeah.
beverage and cosmetics. And so I think
And
there's a gap to be
also,
filled there.
I think they took a break from it because of the price increase from
Yeah,
lockdown period and all of that. So they stopped buying it, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I only know this really from my own team. They stopped buying
yes,
cosmetics, foreign cosmetics, F&B, just because the prices were skyrocketing. They couldn't afford it.
exactly,
I mean, an egg went
exactly.
from what, 1 RMB or less than 1 RMB to 12 RMB per egg,
Oh, it was insane.
right?
Yes, very expensive.
So that's more of a priority than buying cream, right?
Yeah.
Or things like that. I do you see this price benchmarking going down now? Or I want to say going back to normal levels. I don't know what were normal levels before, but at least better than they were in that COVID lockdown era.
Yeah, so pricing in most situations has already come back to where it was.
Okay.
It's got much better. I mean, if we look at global inflation, China's not it's managed to somehow come down again. I don't know how that's possible to where it was before in 2021. That's what we've kind of seen.
And what level is that?
Some things just
Do you know what level it is currently?
I don't know. I don't. But from living there, I feel that the price of a beer, anyway, is an example. It's not changed from what it was two
Right,
years ago.
right,
My groceries are more or less the same.
right.
But then now I've been kind of traveling around the world, like going to Europe, went to North America last week, and then kind of going to Australia. I have seen prices go up, and I felt the difference. Right? I mean, it has been 3 years since I was able to go there, but I have seen the cost of living going up. So I think now it's in a place where definitely for consumers there will be some rebound, right? There will be some, and I don't know if it's going to be Q3 Q4. I don't know if it's going to be really end of this year, but I think, as you said, 2024,
I'm
it'll
more
be
of
a
a
strong year for
realistic
China.
person, and COVID, I was so optimistic that now I'm bringing back my feet back down to earth. And if there's no push in 2024, it'll be very disappointing in my
Yeah,
perspective. Um,
completely agree.
and that's where I would
Completely
say,
agree.
good thing that you started expanding into Southeast Asia, and catering to diversifying into other markets, just in case there isn't that push, right? Um, because it could very well be that brands, like you mentioned earlier, will make that decision saying, okay, well, maybe let's leave China a little bit because it requires so much more investment, and let's focus on Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, or wherever else, and just
Yeah,
diversify
yeah.
as well. Really interesting. Ryan, we've gone way over time, but I do always finish these podcasts with one last question. You can choose whatever date of arrival you want to choose, because I feel for you there too. When you were living with your family and when you came back, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself back in those days, um, if you were mentoring yourself? What is that one piece of advice you would give on that first day you arrived back to China?
I think that yeah, China's very rewarding. To not fit, but it's also very difficult. Like, not to take things too much to heart. I think is really important, and I think also to be able. I would have told myself that there's lots of problems that sometimes upset you, but if you work hard enough at something, it'll always figure itself out, right? That's kind of what I've realized in life, that if you kind of put your mind to it and you don't let it bother you too much and deal with it rather than worrying about it, um, it'll
So
get there eventually.
I feel you with the mutiny. It's coming to my mind, your mutiny. I think you took it personally, didn't you? Trust me, I have taken so many things personally in my career in
Yeah,
China. And a lot of
yeah,
people say, why? And it's your business. You care
yeah,
about it, right?
yeah,
And you hire people who you used a fantastic word. What was it? The circle of trust? Is that what you used?
yeah. Yes, yes,
It's so true. You develop these relationships. I mean, the whole Guanxi thing is real. You develop these relationships with business partners. Um, and if something goes sour, you do take it personally. How can you not take it personally?
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't get it. It's still advice I try
yeah,
to give myself every single day. Don't take it
yeah,
personally.
yeah.
They're
And it's very
allowed
hard
to
to
be
do.
angry to you once in a while,
Yeah,
right? Um,
yeah.
it's sound advice. Yeah, don't take it so personally. Don't take it to heart. But
Yeah.
difficult when
It's
it's your own
hard to
business.
practice. It is. It is. It is very much so.
Ryan, I want to thank you so much for joining. I am going to be providing your company description, your details, your LinkedIn URL, your email address, so people can also reach out to you after podcast goes live, in case they've got any questions for you, or just simply they're interested in talking to you about what you do. So thanks a lot for coming in, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Christina. Cheers.
Enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Now, can Woodburn help you? I am offering a free 30-minute call where we discuss the obstacles you are encountering on your China business journey and how we can help accelerate your success. The link to my diary is in the show notes, and I look forward to speaking with you.